Right. Awesome. Everybody's very happy with their sex life.
Unfair poll.
It is a very unfair poll. It's not very anonymous. But everybody's smoking. You know what?
I'm getting married. I'll just own that right now. Sorry, Robbie.
I'm sexually active but not that interested. Look, that happens. I mean, sometimes we just lose interest. Things change. Dead and buried is another thing. I mean, at the time as well. I mean, I know because I'm kind of there myself at the moment, like dead and buried. And I think my husband thinks sometimes you've got a bit of a raw deal, but we'll work on it. We've got to work on it. So, what else we got here? We've got, yes, it's exactly how we'd like. Yes, I feel it should be better. I think everybody thinks at some point things should be better than what they are. No, but I don't know how to change it. That's the biggest thing, is that we kind of end up sitting in a space where we're like, we recognize there's an issue, but we end up like ostriches with our heads in the sand, and we just go, I don't know how to change it, and I don't have the energy, and I don't have the time. So everybody thinks 7 to 10 times is how many times we should have sex, or once. That's quite polarized, isn't it? And I think when
there's no option, there's no zero.
I reckon what's everybody says, what's a healthy time? What's the normal amount of times that you're supposed to have sex in a week? There isn't a normal or a healthy. It's whatever works for you guys. If once is good enough, then that's absolutely fine. I have a couple who really have to have it like once or twice a day. I just don't have the energy for that. We're good for them. That's what works for them. Desire means love. Right, that's also a bit polarized. Desire, we'll talk a bit more about that. And men's desire is consistent, whereas a woman's is not 100% false. Great, I'm glad that you agree it's 100% false. I see as many men with low desire as I do women. I'm just going to pop back into the presentation here. So I appreciate you doing that, putting you on the spot novelty questionnaire. We're all getting to know each other today. Okay, so some of the things that we'll be covering this morning is what is desire. We're going to look at the sexual response cycle. We're going to look at some of the factors that affect your desire from, a bit of a clinical, psychological, social relationship perspective, because it's very multi-layered. It's not a simple thing. How to nurture your desire and any discussion that you'd like to take from that. So why are we bothering with this today? Why is sexuality important? It's a conversation that happens all the time. So it's really part of our eros drive. You have your Thanos drive, which is your death drive, and you have your eros drive, which is your life drive. And when your sex life is flourishing and you're feeling connected and you feel like you belong and you feel like you're loved, you really feel quite alive. And sexuality and sex is very much a part of that. So when it's going well, it's going great. It probably makes up 5% of the relationship. But when it's not going well, it makes up 95% of the relationship. It sort of goes into other areas of frustration or anger or resentment, and it sort of pops up in other areas around why didn't you put the cup in the dishwasher argument, but it's because you rejected me last night when I approached you for sex. So it comes out in lots and lots of different ways. It's affected by our core beliefs, and our core beliefs absolutely affect whether our desire is healthy. So we'll talk about that as far as social relationships, cultural upbringing, what were the family dynamics like, what was your sex education at school like, what did you hear from your friends, and of course what are your experiences. All of the beliefs affect how you interact with your own sexuality and your own desire. So how we feel about ourselves, our bodies, and our relationships is a huge thing. Body image issues is, I think, one of the top issues why women especially avoid sex or don't have a great desire, because they don't feel great in their bodies. And so most of the time women are spending time outside of their bodies, doing the tasks, doing the kids, paying the bills, going to work, where you're not really in your body a lot if you're not comfortable. And that's why a lot of the activities today and tomorrow are based around where you can be in your body and learn some body positivity and enjoy being in your body. Because the best sex that you've had is probably the sex that you didn't know what colour the curtains were and you didn't really care. It was the sex when you were just in it and enjoying the moment, really, really present with it. So how we feel about our relationships is also really important, and how that can come into play. And we'll talk a bit about more about that in a minute. It also affects our perceived value to others in our life. We can really be self-conscious about whether or not we think we're going to be rejected or accepted by our partner, or if you're single, if you're out looking, if you're on Tinder. I mean, I don't know how many filters people are using on Tinder these days, but we really worry about whether or not we're good enough, whether or not we're worthy for someone to want to be with us in a very intimate way. So if our self-esteem is not great, if we're not feeling so good about ourselves, it can really affect your desire as well. Flexible and changing depending on our life course, of course. And we'll talk about the role of sex in our lives, how that changes throughout your lifespan. And I suppose you've got to end up in a place where sex is because it's pleasurable and it's fun, rather than because I need it to get into a relationship, I need to have sex to maintain a relationship. Oh, I need to have a baby, I need to do this, I need to do that. Then you end up at the end of the day going, look, I'm done with that, I don't need to do that anymore. If it's not fun and pleasurable, you don't have a positive feedback loop about it in your brain, and you don't really want to do it. So, just some internal self-reflection this time for yourselves. We don't have to say it out loud. The circles of sexuality. I think starting with, if you ask yourself, are you 100% comfortable with your orientation and your gender? Now these days, there's a flag for everything. And there's a whole spectrum. It's not binary anymore. Even the way we express ourselves, which is something Brady's talking about, sometimes we express ourselves in more masculine ways, and sometimes we sit in more feminine energy. Even men do as well. So are you 100% happy with your orientation and your gender? That really affects whether you are sexually, you move into that sexual desire space. Your sexual and reproductive health. When I work with couples who are going through the IVF process, it's a really difficult time for them, because now it's become this thing that they're supposed to be able to do to have a baby has become very medical, and so sex has become very clinical, and the fun and the playfulness has completely gone out the door. Also, just around pain issues, any functioning issues that people might encounter really affects your desire. If you have a negative experience where it doesn't go so well, your brain tells you don't really want to do that again. You put your hand out on a hot plate and you burn yourself, your brain says, don't do that again. So if you have sex and it's painful or you have issues, your brain is telling you not to do that again. So it's really quite a hard job to now turn your brain off and turn towards something that you're trying to work on. Your sexual behaviours and practices is also a huge thing. I often work with people where they've got the sex life that they have overtly in their relationship, and then they kind of have a sex life that they have their fantasy life and the other behaviours that they're engaging in. And that's okay, but they should meet every now and again. We should be able to have both of our sexual selves present in a relationship. So the behaviours and practices are quite important as well, as how do you have sex, how do you interact with it? Are you both having the same kind of sex that you want to have? Or are you having different sex? What by that I mean is, the sex that you're having, is it the kind of sex you want to be having? Sensuality, are you able to feel sensual and step into that space? Men as well, sensuality is quite fantastic. I don't know if, what's it called, Bridgerton, I don't think you guys have watched it, but Bridgerton is back in the 1800s, 1700s, and what they did in that show was, it was about sexuality, but it was really it was about sexuality, but it was really building anticipation. Anticipation of sexuality, or flirting and teasing is really half the fun of it. We have to be able to spend some time in that sensual space rather than just going in for kill. And intimacy. In your relationship, intimacy isn't just sex. Intimacy is experiential intimacy. Do you go and do things that you enjoy? Do you hike up to the top of a mountain and go, yay, we did that, you know, we're a team? That's an experiential intimacy. Do you have intellectual intimacy? Can you have discussions, debates, talks? What happened in the news today? You know, connect on an intellectual level. Spiritual intimacy even is a level of intimacy. Emotional intimacy. I know that when I reach out my hand to you, when I need you, I know you're going to turn back and take my hand and tell me everything's going to be okay. That's really intimate as well. So lots of different levels of intimacy, and just thoughts for you to reflect on around yourselves, I guess, and where you're at the moment. Okay, so what is desire? What is desire? How do you see desire?
It's a thought.
Okay, yeah, it's a thought. And what does it normally come up as?
A wanting.
Perfect, exactly. It's a motivational thought, motivating you to go towards something. I want something. We don't always need what we want. I want pizza, I don't need pizza. But it's definitely a wanting of going towards something that you are desiring, or that person, or that thing, or that object, whatever it is. Now, is there a difference between desire and arousal?
When it comes to pizza,
Desire and satisfaction. Yeah, there is a big difference between desire and arousal. And especially for what we need to understand is that there's responsive desire and there's spontaneous desire. So a lot of the time when you're horny, there is desire for something. I see this person, I want to get close to them, I want to be intimate with them. That's what we call spontaneous desire. But then there's also when you kind of, I'll make an analogy of going to the gym. The idea of going to the gym is not great. But you put your leggings on and you put your shoes on and you get to the gym and you're on the treadmill and then you're going and then you go, oh, actually I feel quite good, and endorphins start pumping and you have a great workout and you walk out going, geez, I wish I went to the gym more often, right? And this is what responsive desire is about. Once you're there, the desire can come. Once you start to feel aroused, then the desire can come. Either one is fine. But I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to always be in the spontaneous desire, in that really fierce wanting mode. What's important about desire is that when the conversation stops between couples about talking about where you're at or talking about your desire and intimacy, that's when you squash desire. When you stop being able to communicate about your needs, being able to put it on the table and talk about it, that really squashes desire. Because it's one of the boundaries that we have. Every day we're crossing our own boundaries to meet other people's needs. Work, kids, your partners, your family. We're always crossing boundaries to meet other people's needs. Being sexual with someone is your last frontier, your last boundary for yourself. And if you feel like you are just giving everywhere else to everyone else, you go, you know, I'm just keeping this for me. I'm not interested. This last boundary is mine. And that's one of the crucial factors that can squash desire as well. Typically in research, women lose interest faster than men do in their partners, believe it or not. But we'll talk a bit about the Coolidge effect as well. The Coolidge effect is where men are genetically designed to increase the diversity of their seed. So we know the Coolidge effect is when because they use mice, I don't know why they always use mice to mirror us, but anyway. So when they put a boy mouse into a box with a female mouse who was receptive, he went nuts, and they copulated and copulated until he was exhausted and could hardly breathe. And then they took her out, and then they put another mouse in, and all of a sudden he was revived, and he copulated until he was almost dead. And then they took her out, and they put another one in, and suddenly he was revived. And he was managed to keep going and going. That's what they call the Coolidge effect. So men are driven to have diversity for themselves sexually. But obviously these days we have social constructs around relationships and monogamy. So unfortunately we normalise a little bit about the fact that we look around. We look at the menu, but you need to eat at home. Otherwise there's a lot of problems. I want to just look at the sexual response cycle quite quickly, and I know this is quite, breaking it down clinically, but it's quite important. So firstly, we have desire. You feel like you want to have sex, you feel like you want to be close to your partner, and you act on that. So then you move into excitement, or the arousal phase, and hopefully we're becoming lubricated, we're becoming excited, the guys are getting erections. That's the excitement phase. Then we have a plateau phase, which is where the stimulation continues, the activity continues, and then eventually it gets to a point where we're able to have orgasm or not, as in many cases of people that I work with. And the orgasm is quite an important dual control model of you are tense, but you also relax at the same time in order to have an orgasm. It's quite an interesting process that happens. And then there's resolution and reflection. Women don't need a long refractory period or a resolution phase. Women can have orgasms quite quickly over and over again. We're blessed in that way. Men might need more refractory period, more time to recover, and that's totally acceptable. So we also hear about porn use and excessive porn use with guys, where they typically have, when we're talking about compulsive porn use and sexual behaviour, not normal sort of porn use behaviour, but they start to worry about erectile dysfunction that's brought on by porn use. But it's usually actually because they're not giving themselves a lot of refractory periods. So these guys, I've dealt with a guy who was masturbating up to 7 hours a day. So he's now disappointed the next day he can't get an erection. Well, mate, you kind of killed it. You killed it the day before. You don't have erectile dysfunction. You just need to take a break. Okay, how are we doing for time here? We're doing fine. Do you have any questions around the sexual response cycle or how the desire phase is important for that? No? Women are quite good. We need a bit of lube and we can go. Guys need a bit more working up. There's a lot more things that have to happen for men to be able to be in that excited phase. There's a lot more performance pressure. There's a lot more cultural pressure on men to be able to be in a certain place in order for sex to happen. And we need to be quite empathetic about that and not too impatient. Because as men are affected by what happens in porn, so are we. We're also thinking, man, aren't you a machine? Can't you just get up and go? Let's go. No pressure, but let's go. So we want to be able to nurture this desire section really quite well. And we want to bring into that flirting, anticipation. I think Brady's talking about 72 hours preparation before having sex. And I was like, oh my God, really? I don't have the time for that. But when I listened to her, I was like, wow, actually, if you had a lead up of anticipation and flirting, when you finally get there, the sex could be so much better. Rather than just, okay, Saturday morning, let's go. Which is kind of what happens with life. So that's the typical sexual response cycle that we work with, and I find that there's issues along all of those planes. So desire, excitement, so women who struggle to become aroused, men who struggle to become aroused, erectile dysfunction, even loss of erection when they've already got one but then they lose it. The plateau phase is generally okay, but that's when the head kicks in. Oh, did I put the dishwasher on? Oh, the kids have got soccer tomorrow, or did I do that chore? And then you kind of lose it. It's gone. You're not present with it anymore. And then orgasm. Some people really struggle to orgasm. Or some people do it too quickly and too well. So we work around that area as well. And then the resolution. And this is when the foreplay should start for the next time. Right? Your foreplay starts after the last orgasm. So biologically, let's consider some of the issues that people come up with as far as their desire is concerned. What do you think some of the biological issues might be that affect your desire? Like body, biological issues. We've got one there. Medications and supplements. Anything you put into your body is going to alter the chemical makeup of what's happening in your body. So anybody who's on SSRIs, like antidepressants, blood pressure medication, diabetes, any of those sort of health conditions and many, many others are going to affect your level of desire and your level of functioning sexually. So what can we do in those cases? We've got to look at, because a lot of people are on antidepressants these days, we've got to be able to look at what are the latest medications, because a lot of the research shows that there's newer ones on the market that are less impactful on sexual desire and sexual functioning. Usually what they do is they numb, they kind of numb your genitals, and so it's really hard to orgasm, or they impact your desire, and they also impact your ability to maintain and have an erection. So we want to be able to speak to your doctor if you're on any medications and say, look, this is really affecting my life in this way. Obviously your mental health comes first, but is there a way that we can tweak it? And also just be careful of any supplements that you might be on, even if it's an over-the-counter mineral or vitamin. For men, zinc's really good. Make sure you're taking zinc, magnesium, all the vitamin Bs. For women, magnesium is really important as well. Any kind of supplements, check what you're taking. What health issues are you managing? Anything from a hangnail to, chronic issues like endometriosis, or if you're living with an illness like trying to cope with cancer, or there's lots of things that we're coping with all the time health-wise. So how do you manage your health but also be able to maintain your intimacy and connection in the relationship? Now Dr. Dutoy will be dialing in from South Africa later this afternoon, and she's going to focus on some of the real medical interventions around trying to maintain intimacy and health and what are some of the latest things on the market. But I do have to warn you, a couple of things are really exciting, but we can't get them here. But there is a trial actually happening in Australia at the moment, a nasal spray trial for desire for women.
Sorry, what trial?
There's a clinical trial happening at the moment for BP101. It's a nasal spray, but we can't, I tried to sign up, we can't do it in Darwin because none of the university outlets are here, so we can't do it, it's all happening down south. How are your hormone levels? So I've worked in the States, I've worked in Canberra, and I've worked up here. And I've come across far more lower testosterone levels here in Darwin than anywhere else. And I think that has something to do with the climate. So a lot of times the computer says no, you're fine, but a lot of the guys are right on the lower baseline of whether or not you take testosterone gel or supplements. It's really important to check your testosterone levels and make sure that your levels are quite good. And there's lots of supplements that you can take. So testosterone is also being tested in women to help us with our desire, because that is the seat of desire for men, that particular hormone. If your estrogen is too low, so if you have a baby, and this happens all the time, 9 months after having the baby, a couple's really putting themselves under pressure saying we should be back on track by now, but she's still breastfeeding. So therefore the estrogen's not there. So the sexual desire is not going to be there. Never mind the fact that she's breastfeeding, that's enough of a progesterone. If that's too high in your system as well, that's going to affect your sexual desire and your sexual functioning as well. So make sure that your levels are all quite good. What was your sexual development like? That's always an interesting question with clients when you do the first consultation, because the neurology is very important here. What happens in your brain? It's not about what's happening in your genitals, it's about what's happening in your brain. What are your initial knee-jerk reactions to things? So if I'm working with a woman who has sexual aversion and you say the word penis, her whole body just cringes up. And that's not because penises are bad, that's because her brain tells her that penises are bad. If there's any issues around trauma or negative experiences, your brain is telling you it's bad. We live a lot in our drive system, and we live a lot in our threat system. Our drive system is the things that we do to feel like we achieve stuff. You get a hit, you get a like on Facebook, you get a dopamine hit. You feel like I'm successful. Everyone likes me, they give me a like on Facebook. If you do your to-do list, if you achieve something, if you're motivated to turn that assignment in or get that work project done, that's all drive system, that's dopamine, it's really important. It's a good system to be in. The threat system is our adrenaline and cortisol. That's our stress system that helps us get through really, really tough and busy times. But that's where we spend most of our time these days, because we are so full of stimulation, we're getting stimulated all the time, there's so much to do. We don't spend a lot of time in our soothing system. which is where we get oxytocin. And oxytocin makes us feel like we belong, that we have a sense of well-being. And how do we get oxytocin? How do you get oxytocin?
Touching.
Touching, yes. Hugs, yes. Closeness. Yeah, there's online stuff that you can get through ASMR videos. I don't know if you've ever come across those. Yeah, do you like ASMR?
Oh, a bit too much.
I know. Right. ASMR is auditory sound, auditory sensory meridian response, and it's these videos online that are very varied, from people eating, and you listen to the sounds of them eating, which is not, I can't do that. But then there's also really, really soft, gentle, personalised role-playing videos with you around caring for you. And if you just let yourself go with it, you just get these hits of oxytocin in your brain. It's awesome.
That's so cool.
So oxytocin is something that we should be taking some time to get every day, like taking a prescription. And tomorrow morning I'm doing a sensory focused touch for couples with my husband, who's very kindly going to volunteer. And we'll work through the different kinds of touch that you can do to nurture that. So psychologically, in your brain, have you had, or do you currently suffer from a mental health condition like depression and anxiety? At some point in your life, you probably will have, or probably will, because we generally do. And that really affects your desire levels. Depression is generally when we're very focused on the past, things that have happened, and we kind of get stuck there a little bit. Anxiety is very future focused. We're very worried about things that are coming up that we have no control over, and we're anxious about that. And this is why mindfulness is such an important approach these days on how to live your life, because mindfulness says the present is what's important. And you just stay in the present and the now, then you can avoid that depression and that anxiety that you might be feeling. Trauma is a very important one. If you've ever had any trauma in your life, especially around sex and sexuality, it's really important to address them, because otherwise it just keeps hanging around and it affects you in your present life. How have your previous experiences been? Like I said, if they're good, your brain's going, yeah, we want to do that again. If they haven't been great, it's not going to be on the forefront of your mind. And part of the sexual development is quite important, because one of the things that I've noticed is that women and men who don't learn to masturbate in their childhood, who don't learn to make those initial connections and you know, with your brain to say self-touching is good, self-touching is soothing, I can teach myself to orgasm. You don't actually make those neural connections in your brain. And I often end up speaking to people where they go, I never got it, I didn't understand. Everybody else was going nuts, and I was like, I don't really get it. Because they weren't made initially with those initial connections. So masturbation is really important. It sounds, you know, even just the word, some people can't stand the word, but it's really important. What is your programming and your core beliefs is really important to understand. How do you cope with stress? Do you have work-life balance? Why are you laughing about that? No work-life balance.
What is that?
What is that?
Where you
Yeah, work-life balance. Like you said, what is that? You know, in the olden days, we would be in a village of people, helping out with raising kids, helping out with chores, helping out with doing stuff. We don't live in a village anymore, and it's all just up to us. So we don't have a lot of time to look after ourselves, and we don't believe that we should, because no one else is. So I know in Japan, I was talking to some students, in Japan the suicide rate is so high because the cultural belief is that you should sacrifice until you die, and that is honourable. And I just think that sounds a little sad. We need to have the work-life balance, because if you don't have space for pleasure in your life, what's the point? Your life doesn't have a lot of colour. And I'm not just talking sexually. What are some other things that you find pleasurable? I'm talking about pizza. Food. Yeah, taste. What else do we find pleasurable?
Exercise.
Exercise. Yeah, you feel energized when you do exercise, you get those endorphins. You feel like a sense of accomplishment, being in your body. Yeah, what did you say?
Art.
Art. What's pleasurable about us? Because I don't get it. What's pleasurable about us?
I guess it depending on what it is, but it's that probably that hand-eye, coordination, physically doing something, and you don't actually
Be present with it.
Yeah, it doesn't actually, not that it doesn't matter because art has its purpose, but it also if it's not something that you have to do, it's so enjoyable.
Okay, something you make time for because you find it enjoyable. Like you said, it's not something I have to do, I want to do it. I desire to do it. And so art is something you see, right? I see it and I make meaning of it. And then it clicks in with me. I taste something and I really enjoy that, and I get my nice dopamine in my head, or I have a memory about something positive about when I smelt that or I tasted that, and you make that positive association. So it's all around the senses. The pleasure in our life is all around our senses. Touch, taste, smell, and things that we see. Do you have an erotic library? No? It's hard.
No, it's not one.
No, yeah, not a bookcase, not a bookshelf. In your head, an erotic library is really important. There's a great book by Esther Perel called Erotic Intelligence. I'd encourage you to have a look at it. Because when we look at the stage here of plateau, when you're having sex, to get you up to orgasm, a lot of the times we need help to kick it up a notch. We either increase the stimulation, but you have to increase your subjective arousal as well. You have to increase what's happening in your brain. And there's no thought police. So you can think about whatever you want. But you've got to be able to pull on something, a previous experience, a scene you've seen in a movie, something that you've read, something that when you think about that thing, your body responds to it. And you kick it up a notch in your arousal level, and you hit your orgasm spot, right? So having an erotic library is really important. And so you've got to pay attention on maybe stocking up on your erotic library, whether it's erotic reading, whether it's ethical porn, whether it's doing your own movie or memories of your own interactions. But make sure there's something there that you can pull upon, so that you can start creating that positive feedback loop about, remember when this was really good, remember when I thought about this or I saw this and that turned me on. We've got to have that healthy erotic library there. So social and family environment, what are the attitudes towards sex in your home? We talked about work-life balance. And does the home have space for sexy time? That's a big thing. Try never ever have very serious talks in your bedroom before you go to sleep or when you wake up. The bedroom should be your sexy space. Or you can choose another room, it doesn't have to be your bedroom. But don't have where you have fights or conflicts and things like that. Always make sure you're not in that place where you would normally have sex. If you've got kids or pets even, because that can be awkward, make sure that you have a space where this is where we are intimate. And we know that when we're in this space, we can dip into that sexual part of our relationship whenever we choose to. You want to have a simmering in your relationship around sexual tension, and then when you choose to, you can bring it up to a boil. But you've got to have the right environment for that, and the right context for that. Relationships. Does your partner know what they're doing? Do you feel like you know what you're doing? I had a lady the other day saying to me, how did she put it? She said, oh, yeah, he doesn't really know what he's doing, but that's okay, because I'd fake it. And I went, oh no, that's so unfair. It's so unfair to fake it. We've got to find a way to be able to communicate with our partners and say, hey, do you mind doing this? Or can you do that a bit harder? Or talking about your needs, because your partners want to please you. We want to please our partners, but if you don't know, you're just going to keep doing what you've always done, and your partner ends up going more towards their secret sex life, the fantasy land in their head that you're not a part of. Yeah? I see it in couples all the time. So it is our duty to be able to say, hey, let's try this, let's try that. And the fact that you guys are here today is a testament that you want to try new things, you want to learn new things. It's fantastic. Has sex become a currency or a chore? Now that often happens in relationships. I know that her mood is better if she has some sex. If I give her sex. I know, oh, we haven't had sex for 3 weeks, we better have sex. There's nothing playful or fun about that. Or it's, the thought is, when you're talking about thoughts, desire, the thought is, I'd like to, but it's just too much hard work. To get myself into that space is so much hard work, I choose not to and I turn away from it because it feels like a chore, another thing I have to do. That's not sexy or playful either. Are you having the type of sex you would like? And I touched on that in the beginning. The type of sex is really important. Do you have a spectrum of your couple sexual style that you can choose, whether it's going to be a quickie or whether it's going to be a long love-making session or everything in between? And what kind of sex is that? Some people like a bit of BDSM. Some people don't. Some people like to make love. Some people just like to do it really quickly. I don't want to be crass, so I'm not going to be. But the positions as well is quite important. I have another couple where it's really quite frustrating because the way she learned to masturbate is quite rigorous. It was what we call traumatic masturbation. So when little kids are younger, they might learn to masturbate on a pillow or on the corner of a mattress. I had a young lady once who used a table leg. So that's quite a lot of stimulation, right? That's quite difficult for any other person to match that level of rubbing and stimulation. So when she has sex, she has to be on top and it has to be a certain way and it has to be very vigorous to be able to get her there because that's her arousal network in her brain that has been created. It's very hard for her to do it another way because her brain just says, no, you just do it this way, it's easier, just stick with that. But he gets frustrated because for him it's not very pleasurable and it hurts. So we've got to try and work with that couple to change that, the way that they're having sex so it works for both of them. Do you have fun and feel intimate with your partner? So these are all just really reflective questions for yourselves about your relationship and where things are at. Do you feel like you can have fun and do you feel like you can be intimate with your partner? Do you feel like you can say, hey, let's talk about this. Hey, let's put this on the table. And I'm probably talking to the wrong people here because you're here. So you've obviously put it on the table and said, hey, let's see what we can do. We want to be able to grow until the day we die. You don't want to have the same sex until the day you die. You want to be able to morph it, grow it. Okay. How do we nurture our desire? This book is gold. Emily Nagoski wrote a book, Come As You Are, and the approaches and the way it's talked about is both for men and for women. It talks about brakes and accelerators. It talks about that dual control model in our brain. We've got lots of brakes. Our brain is an excuse-generating machine. Right, the thoughts that we have in our brain will always give us an excuse why we don't have to do something. Because it's geared towards conserving energy. It's a survival thing. So anytime you think about doing something and the immediate thing from your brain is, oh, that's too much hard work, that's just your survival part of your brain kicking in. We don't actually have to pay that much attention. You just go, yeah, the brakes are on. The kids are awake. Okay, maybe that's a reasonable one. The dishwasher's not on, or we've got to be up early, or everything that pops up to say why we shouldn't be able to move towards each other and have sex is going to be there. So you learn to accept that, but you also need to know what your brakes are, because that may be deeper than I've got to be up early in the morning. There may be bigger brakes that can be addressed. So as you notice the brakes, you then have to put it's like driving a car. You take your foot off the brake and you accelerate. And you go towards the thing and the goal that you're working towards. I'm working on improving my desire. I'm working on turning towards my partner more. That's my accelerator. I know that what I'm feeling and thinking now feels like, oh, this is going to be too much work. But I know that afterwards, if I do the work, we feel connected, we're laughing, things are good, I've had a great orgasm, things are good. So we don't want to stay in the moment of the excuses and the brakes. We want to be able to shift our focus of attention to the accelerators, the things that make me want to have sex or desire my partner. And it includes making sure the context is right. Don't try and push yourself to put brakes, to put the accelerator on when it's not reasonable. You know, but you've got to invest in what the accelerators are. Does that make sense? And this book is really good to help you. And it's a framework that you can work on how you manage your thoughts, the sex in your brain, because it's not about the genitals, it's all up here, around desire. Nurture your erotic library. Give yourself permission to go there. Find the things that turn you on, the things that have turned you on before. Even if you discovered porn as a young boy in a magazine, but now it's all there on the internet and very quick and videos and stuff like that, that first thing that turned you on is still there. Go back and remember what that was before all the other stimulation came. Give yourself permission to go there. That's the first thing. I know my brakes are on, but I'm going to give myself permission to bring it up to a boil. Write your own erotic story. As a couple, maybe you can write your own erotic story for each other. Let your partner, you write an erotic story about what would turn you on and what you would find really erotic, and you share it with your partner and they share it with you. You're not having this face-to-face chat about what you want sexually, but you're kind of alluding to, wow, this would be great if we try this. We'll try your story and we'll try my story. Ethical porn is fantastic. Why do we have ethical porn? Well, these days I think it's necessary. There's been, porn as an industry has a reputation, and there's a reason for that reputation, and I'll talk more about that tomorrow, and I'll talk about porn or not to porn. I'm not anti-porn in any way, shape or form. Anything that's going to help me get there, anything that's going to raise my arousal, I'm happy to do that, but I want to make sure I feel good about what I'm looking at. So ethical porn, there's, I think like Lustry, Erica Lush, she's got a great website where she's a film director, and she's got some great stuff, but of course, this is subscription stuff. So that's always the kicker. Am I prepared to pay for what I'm looking at? If you ever struggled with masturbation, there's a fantastic site for women called Oh My God Yes, to help bring yourself to orgasm. That's a great website. It's quite technical, but it's very helpful. Dipsy Stories is another one which has some fantastic erotic stories on it. If you need to, if you Google up erotic story, you're going to get plenty of literature there. But it's about finding the stuff that talks to you. Curious Creatures is another website which is great. They do online virtual couples workshops. They do specific videos on how to please the vulva, how to please the penis. It's all quite explicit, but they're great, very professional in how they deliver their content and what they do. So, self-care and work-life balance. Sleep, diet, and exercise. Really important. Resilience. How do you bounce back if something pops up? If your partner says, I'm not in the mood, how do you bounce back from that without internalizing it, personalizing it, and taking it as a really big rejection? As a couple, how do you work with your resilience? Do you have resilience? Mindful pleasure, not just sexually. Enjoy the sun on your skin. Enjoy the smell of an orange. Allow yourself to go there. Give yourself permission to go there. Seek support for any anxiety, performance, or health or medical issues. Seek support. There's supports out there. Flirt. Be curious. And maintain novelty. Curiosity is so important as far as desire is concerned. If you've been with your partner a long time and you're like, oh, we've been together for so long, I know everything about this person, there's no more curiosity. And I guarantee you don't. Because even after 3 years, you're not the same people. 5 years, definitely not. 10 years, absolutely not. You don't know each other anymore like you think you do. So how do you bring back some curiosity about your relationship with each other? And if you need to, see couples therapy to get some specific interactions and strategies for yourselves. So that's it about desire. Hopefully you got a better understanding of desire, maybe some practical things to consider and reflect on in your own relationships and for yourselves, and maybe some things to think about or to try. Does anybody want to ask any questions? No. I'll share a bit of a personal thing. So as a sex therapist, I think everybody assumes that you should be on top of it all the time. You should just be immune to everything that's going on. I'm very much in a place, I've just turned 45 yesterday.
Happy birthday.
Oh, thanks. This is my present to myself. Yeah, turning 45, geez, 2 young kids, 10 and 12, house, dogs, cats, work, and I definitely use work as a way of not having to be present at home a lot of the time. But yeah, trying to nurture my desire is an extremely difficult thing, and I know I have all this information, and I still find it hard. It's not perfect, and if I don't pay attention to it, and if I don't make space for it in my life, it's gone, really easily gone. Especially heading into perimenopause and menopause, which Dr. DeToy will cover later. So it's something you have to invest in, and you've got to give yourself permission to do it. So hopefully you can use some of those tools.